In this video, we will discuss how to find the x and the y intercepts from the graph, as well as how to find the relative minimum and the relative maximum from the graph. Now, the x-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the x-axis, where y is equal to 0. And the y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis, or x is equal to 0. If we are given the following graph of the function f of x, what are the x-intercepts and what are the y-intercepts? This is our x-axis right here. And the points where the graph crosses the x-axis are these 4 points. So what are our x-intercepts? The leftmost point has an x-coordinate of -5. So one of the x-intercepts is -5, 0. The next point is -1, 0. The next point right here is 1, 0. And the rightmost point is 5, 0. So these are our 4 x-intercepts. Now, what about the y-intercept? The y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. This is our y-axis. This is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. Therefore, the y-intercept, remember the x-coordinate is 0, and the y-coordinate of that point is 1, 2, 3, 4. So the y-intercept is 0, 4. For this one right here, find the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts. The x-intercepts are, you have these points right here with coordinates -5, 0, -1, 0, and 3, 0. And our y-intercept is this point right here, 0, +2. I hope you got it. Now, what about the relative minimum and the relative maximum of a function? Now, we know that minimum is the lowest point and maximum is the highest point. When we say relative, we are talking about what is the lowest point in the given interval or what is the highest point in a given interval. This is to differentiate it from what we call absolute maximum and absolute minimum. When we say absolute, it is the highest point in the given function or the lowest point in the given function for the absolute minimum. Let us just focus our attention on the relative. Sometimes this is also called local maximum or local minimum. Let's look at this graph. Identify the location of the relative minimum, lowest point, and the relative maximum or highest point in the following function. If you would consider this graph, we have these two low points. So we have two relative minimums. The relative minimum here would have an x-coordinate of 1, 2, 3, -3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, -3, -4. And the other relative minimum is this point right here, 1, 2, 3, +3, and -2. Now, what about the relative maximum? We only have one relative maximum here, and it is this point. So the relative maximum would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Relative maximum is 0, 4. So you have the relative minimum and the relative maximum, two relative minimums and one relative maximum. Now, what is the absolute maximum here? What is the highest point in the graph? The absolute maximum is at infinity. So the absolute maximum would be, let's see, absolute maximum would be negative infinity, or it doesn't exist because infinity doesn't exist. So there is no absolute maximum. Let me write it down. No absolute maximum. What about the absolute minimum? The absolute minimum is the lowest point in the graph. We have two relative minimums here. Which is the lowest? The lowest is this point. So that is your absolute minimum. The absolute minimum is the point -3, -4. So this one is also your absolute minimum. Try it out. What is the relative maximum, and what is the relative minimum? Okay, we have one relative maximum, it is this point, relative max. And we have one relative minimum, which is this point, relative minimum. So the relative maximum is the 0.13, and the relative minimum is this point, which is 1, 2, 3, -3, -4. There is no absolute maximum, there is no absolute minimum because it goes to positive infinity and to negative infinity.